So many of you watched that message about the day a good man stops handing every part of himself away and how that becomes the day his whole life begins to change. I want to go deeper into that today. This is not about becoming harsh. It is not about becoming selfish. It is about the moment a man finally sees the truth. The person he has ignored the longest, neglected the most, and abandoned the deepest has been himself all along. That truth hits hard. Every man reaches a point where something inside him can no longer stay asleep. It happens. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. But it comes. Not because he is angry at the world, not because he wants revenge. It comes because something in him finally gets honest. He sees the weight, he sees the cost, and he begins to understand how long he has been carrying everyone while quietly leaving himself behind. For years, most men are taught to build their whole identity around being useful, be needed, be dependable, be the provider. Be the one who stays calm when everything around him falls apart. Be the strong one, be the steady one, be the man who takes the pressure so everyone else can rest. That becomes his role. That becomes his value. And for many men, that becomes the only version of themselves they think matters. He becomes the man who carries everything without making noise. He carries his children. He carries his partner. He carries the bills, the pressure, the expectations, and the emotional weight no one else wants to touch. He carries family problems. He carries work stress. He carries responsibilities that never seem to end. And he does it in silence. He rarely complains. He rarely asks for help. He rarely even stops long enough to ask what all of it is doing to him. That is why so many good men break in silence. Not because they are weak, not because they are incapable. They break because no one can keep pouring from emptiness forever. A man can keep showing up. He can keep grinding. He can keep giving. But eventually, life forces him to face what he has been ignoring. He looks down and realizes there is nothing left in him. He has given everything away, and now he has nothing left to stand on. For some men, that wake-up call comes through betrayal. For others, it comes through divorce. For some, it comes when money falls apart. For others, it comes through illness, burnout, or the kind of stress that makes the body start keeping score. Sometimes it is one painful moment. Sometimes it is a long collapse. But sooner or later, life strips away the illusion and forces a man to see what remains when everything external is gone. I have seen this happen more times than I can count. I have watched men sit in front of me carrying years of pressure in their chest, trying to hold themselves together while everything around them falls apart. I have watched men speak through tears because they lost the marriage, the money, the house, the version of life they thought they had built. And what hurts them most is not only the loss, it is the realization that they never built themselves. That is the moment the question changes. Before that moment, most men ask, what do I need to do for everyone else? How do I fix this? How do I keep it all together? How do I keep everyone happy? But after that moment, the question becomes different. It becomes sharper, more honest. What do I need now? What have I ignored in myself? What do I need to build so I do not disappear inside the life I keep maintaining? That is where real change begins. That is where a man stops living in survival and starts stepping into leadership. Not leadership for show, not leadership built on image, real leadership, internal leadership. He begins to lead himself. He starts taking care of his body before it forces him to listen. He begins building discipline where excuses used to live. He starts moving with intention. He stops drifting. He stops numbing. He stops waiting for life to rescue him. He starts choosing better, better habits, better thoughts, better routines, better standards. He begins feeding his mind with things that sharpen him instead of things that distract him. He stops living on noise. He stops filling himself with content that keeps him passive, numb, and disconnected. He begins to protect his attention because he finally understands that what owns his attention slowly begins to own his life. And when that shift happens, everything about him begins to change. His priorities shift, his posture shifts, his energy shifts. The way he speaks changes, the way he carries himself changes. He becomes more grounded, more clear, more calm. There is less panic in him, less performance, less need to prove. Something steadier begins to form, not louder, stronger, not harder, more rooted. He starts becoming a man who is no longer surviving himself. He begins to understand something most men learn too late. If his peace depends on another person, then his peace is fragile. If his worth depends on being needed, then his worth can be taken. If his identity only exists through service, approval, or usefulness, then the second those things disappear, he disappears too. That is why so many men feel exhausted. It is not weakness. It is the exhaustion of living without a solid self beneath everything. A man who finally chooses himself is not abandoning others. He is ending the habit of abandoning himself. That is the difference. He is not becoming distant. He is becoming honest. He is not pulling away because he cares less. He is pulling inward because he finally understands he has to rebuild what he never learned to protect. That is not selfish. That is repair. That is responsibility. And most men need that season more than they are willing to admit. When a man starts focusing on his growth, many people misunderstand it. They call it distance. They call it selfishness. They call it cold. But often, it is none of those things. It is a man trying to rebuild his life from the inside out. It is a man learning how to become stable without depending on constant praise, constant need, or constant emotional approval. That work is quiet, it is personal, and it changes everything around him. A man who chooses himself does not lose the people meant for him. He loses the people who only benefited from his self-neglect. He stops attracting relationships built on overgiving and fear. He begins attracting connection built on choice, respect, and stability. That changes everything. He no longer stays because he is afraid to be alone. He stays because he wants to be there. That is what makes love stronger. Choice always creates stronger love than fear ever will. There is a huge difference between a man who needs love and a man who chooses love. One comes from fear, the other comes from identity. One stays because he is afraid of losing someone. The other stays because he has built enough within himself to love without losing who he is. That kind of man loves better. He loves with steadiness. He loves with clarity. He loves with discipline. And his love becomes stronger because it is no longer rooted in fear. When a man builds his own peace, his own standards, and his own self-respect, the ripple effect touches everything. He becomes a better father, a better partner, a better leader. He communicates better. He listens better. He becomes less reactive, less desperate, less controlled by emotion. He becomes more intentional, more steady, more present. That is what real masculine strength looks like. Not domination, not noise, not ego, stability, clarity, direction, discipline. That is real power. So if you are a man hearing this, hear it clearly. Your life changes when you do, not when she changes. Not when your family changes, not when your luck changes, not when the world suddenly becomes easier. Your life changes the day you stop giving every piece of yourself away and finally begin putting something back into your own hands. That is the day your direction changes. Build from there. Build yourself first, then watch everything else change with you.